The two main things. One is what Prabhupada says in the purport, how the world, this material universe, is designed in one sense to have a huge amount of uncertainty, instability, and also suffering. And this is necessary for our growth. It may sound negative, but it's actually a very necessary part for all the living entities' spiritual growth, because it makes us strive for something eternal happiness. The second point which I want to focus on is that even the ups and downs, even the downs of our spiritual life are also, in the long run, it is also part of our development and growth. Even though at the point when we're going through an obstacle or a suffering, it may seem very difficult or demoralizing. At that point, it is actually very, in the long run, it's actually very helpful for our spiritual advancement. So let me share the screen um, and do the verses that we are supposed to be doing. Okay, so I'll just read the Sanskrit for the first one, and then we'll read the translations for the remaining ones. Before I do that, first I want to offer my obeisances to Sri Guru Vaishnavas and the Srimad Bhagavatam. So let me just say my invocation prayers. Om Adhyana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Gandharvan avadit tatra vadhyan vai Vishnu Sakti dirk nagal labda vara sarpat abhayam smaratam nidam. Translation. There in Rasatala, the lower region of the universe, Purukutsa, being empowered by Lord Vishnu, was able to kill all the Gandharvas who deserved to be killed. Purukutsa received the benediction from the serpents that anyone who remembers his history of his being brought by Narmada to the lower regions of the universe will be assured of safety from the attack of snakes. So this is part of the dynasty of, I think, Mandata Muni. So this is, the Bhagavatam is giving some kind of history of some of the kings and so forth. So the next one, also a bit about Purukutsa. The son of Purukutsa was Trasadasyu, who was the father of Anaranya. Anaranya's son was Haryasva, the father of Praruna. Praruna was the father of Tribandana. And this is the verse which I want to focus on. Okay. So the son of Tribandana was Satyavrata, who is celebrated by the name Trishanku, because he kidnapped the daughter of a Brahmana when she was being married. His father cursed him to become a Chandala. So his own father cursed him to be Chandala, lower than a Shudra. So Chandala, basically, the literal meaning is someone who's like below the four varnas. Usually, literally refers to actually someone who's like a dog eater. And usually the they engage in a livelihood which is considered to be very degrading or sinful. Thereafter, by the influence of Vishwamitra, he went to the higher planetary system, the heavenly planets. In his material body, sorry, let me just read that again. Thereafter, by the influence of Vishwamitra, he went to the higher planetary system, the heavenly planets, but in his material body. But because of the prowess of the demigods, he fell back downward. Nonetheless, By the power of Vishwamitra, he did not fall all the way down. Even today, he can still be seen hanging in the sky, head downward. So it's a very interesting, curious pastime of this person who went to Vishwamitra for help. I'm getting some echo here. Um, to go to heavenly planets in his material body, in his current material body. And actually, Vishwamitra helped him by his yogic power. But the gods like Indra and the other rishis like Vashishta, they protested. They say you cannot do that, and and by their powers they prevented him from coming up. And he kind of suspended mid-air. And Vishwamitra actually created, another universe for him. And we'll come to that story a bit later. But I want to actually kind of focus today on the story of Vishwamitra. Okay. Like I said earlier, the two main themes that I want to look at is how the material world was designed for uncertainty and misery as part of a growth to make us strive for something more eternal. Can you hear me? No. Okay. I can't hear you, Adipurusha Prabhu, but I think you're asking me to speak louder.
If you could speak a little louder, it would help us. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry. So let me read the purport. Let me share the screen again. What Prabhupada has to say. I think he says in the next verse actually. The son of Trishanku was Harish Chandra. Because of Harish Chandra, there was a quarrel between Vishwamitra and Vashishta, who for many years fought one another, having been transformed into birds. So we get a little bit more information about Vishwamitra here. And a few other characters that are being introduced, Harish Chandra and Vashishta. So let's read the purport. Vishwamitra and Vashishta were always inimical. Formerly, Vishwamitra was a Kshatriya, and by undergoing severe austerities, he wanted to become a Brahmana. But Vashishta would not agree to accept him. In this way, there was always disagreement between the two. Later, however, Vashishta accepted him because of Vishwamitra's quality of forgiveness. Once, Harishchandra performed a yajna for which Vishwamitra was the priest. But Vishwamitra, being angry at Harishchandra, took away all his possessions, claiming them as a contribution of dakshina. Vashishta, however, did not like this, and therefore a fight arose between Vashishta and Vishwamitra. The fighting became so severe that each of them cursed the other. One of them said, "May you become a bird," and the other said, "May you become a duck." Thus both of them became birds and continued fighting for many years because of Harishchandra. We can see that such a great mystic yogi as Saubhari became a victim of sense gratification, and such great sages as Vashishta and Vishwamitra became birds. This is the material world. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino Arjuna. Within this material world or within this universe, however elevated one may be in material qualities, one must suffer the conditions of birth, death, old age, and disease. Janma, mrityu, jara, vyadi. Therefore, Krishna says that this material world is simply miserable, dukhalem ashashvatam. The Bhagavatam says, padam padam niyat vipadam. At every step there is danger. Therefore, because the Krishna consciousness movement provides the opportunity for the human being to get out of this material world, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, this movement is the greatest benediction in human society. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Okay, so here Prabhupada is pointing the examples of great yogis like Vishwamitra, Shaubhari Muni, whom we heard about in the past few days. Both of them were great, powerful, mystic yogis. They could do wonderful things, and yet Shaubhari Muni fell victim, by looking at a fish, and he became eventually married to 50 wives. And Vishwamitra, he also became a bird because of some fight with Vashishta. So I want to talk a little bit about Vishwamitra today, just a background about his. First, I want to speak about some of the episodes in his life, especially his rivalry with Vashishta, and also his evolution as a spiritual practitioner, and what we can learn from that. Okay. So the story, the rivalry between Vishwamitra and Vashishta started in very ancient times. Vishwamitra at that time was known as Kaushika. He was a king. He was actually born as a Kshatriya. And at one time, Vishwamitra, at that time is known as Kaushika, along with many of his, thousands of soldiers, came across the hermitage of Vashishta Muni. And when they went there, Vashishta Muni received them very nicely, and he wanted to, like when a guest comes, want to do everything you can to take care of them. And Vashishta Muni actually insisted that, let me take care of you and feed you. Vishwamitra said, no, no, don't worry about it. There's so many people. Don't bother. We're fine. But Vashishta Rishi said, no, no, I insist. I want to feed you and serve you. So then Vashishta Rishi had a cow called Nandini. This cow was not an ordinary cow. It's actually a desire-fulfilling cow. It's a special cow that can fulfill any desires that he had. So he asked that cow to actually produce enough, all the best food, drinks, beverages, and all kinds of palatable dishes to feed Vishwamitra and his entire army. And Vishwamitra when he saw that, he was completely impressed. He was astounded. How is this rishi able to feed all of us? And he had a desire to possess the cow. He thought if he can possess this cow, he can always feed his army. He doesn't have to worry about trying to procure food for them. And then he told Vashishta, hey, Vashishta, the idea is that, according to Vedic etiquette, the best thing that one has in the country should be offered to the king. And it's actually true. It's the same argument was given by Krishna to what's his name? The story of the Shamantaka jewel, Satyabhama's father. I think Satya. What's his name again?
Satyajit?
Satyajit, yeah, Satyajit. So Krishna actually told him the similar thing, but Satyajit refused. By the way, it's a bit another pastime. He said he was reluctant to give up the Shamantaka jewel to Krishna, who wanted to give it to Ugrasena, who at that time was the king. So he got in Satyajit got in a lot of trouble for that. But similarly, Vashishta actually also refused to give to Kamadhenu, but his reasoning was different. He said that but because of this cow Nandini, I'm able to produce things like ghee and all kinds of paraphernalia by which I do by the sacrifices. In other words, this cow was a source of dharma for him. It's helping him to perform his sacrifices and his religious duties, which is, by the way, the same argument that Yudhishthir gave when he was challenged by Shakuni during the gambling match. Shakuni and Duryodhan, they tried to rob Yudhishthir of all his wealth, his power, his opulence, his servants, even his brothers. And before the match started, Yudhishthir protested. He said, this is unfair. You cannot ask me to do this because Duryodhan, you must understand that I'm not enjoying this for my sense gratification. I'm using all my wealth to give charity to the Brahmanas. For them to perform sacrifices and so forth, so that there will be harmony and prosperity and peace in the universe. So anyway, this is a common Vedic concept. So Vashishta refused to give the cow, and Vishwamitra became angry. So what he did, he tried to forcibly steal the cow by using his military prowess. All his soldiers tried to attack the hermitage, and he tried to steal the cow. But Vashishta Rishi, he was able to use his yogic powers as a rishi, and through his powers he produced an entire army by itself, which defeated all of Vishwamitra's army and soldiers. And Vishwamitra actually killed Vashishta's son. Vashishta had 100 sons, and Vishwamitra actually killed them. And Prabhupada writes in one of the purports in the I think the first canto of the Bhagavatam, that Vashishta Rishi was so mortified by the killing of the sons that he actually was contemplating, was trying to commit suicide, but each time he was unsuccessful. But anyway, Vishwamitra was ultimately defeated by Vashishta's mystic power, his yogic power. And then he thought, wow, the Brahmana is so much more powerful than the Kshatriya. So let me also become a Brahmana. So this is what Prabhupada writes, that Vishwamitra was born as a Kshatriya, but then he became a Brahmana later on because he performed very, very severe austerities, meditating for thousands of celestial years to become like a yogi, um, to match the power of Vashishta, and also become like like a Brahmana, and what happened was that, so I think this part here I want to kind of relate it to our own lives, like how initially Vishwamitra was humiliated. He was defeated by spiritual, by Vashishta's powers, mystic powers, spiritual powers. One can, you can use that word in some sense, I suppose. So this is kind of similar, and then he wanted to emulate the person who defeated him. He wanted to become like a Brahmana. So in some sense, think about our life. Sometimes, we meet a devotee. We meet the devotees, and we're very attracted to them. Or we hear the great pastimes of the great Vaishnavas like the Goswamis, and we are very impressed. So sometimes we think, okay, we also want to become like that, which is actually a good thing. That is a good desire because we are desiring to become like a devotee. So what Vishwamitra did, in his case, he performed the uh, external activities of Brahmana, like performing austerities, practicing yogic power, and so forth. So similarly, sometimes in our spiritual life, and this is it's part of our growth, we actually adopt the external signs of a Vaishnava, and there could be, or the external activities of a Vaishnava, in our desire to become a devotee, which is actually a great thing. Like that could be like dhotis, or dress or kurtas. It could be in the 18th, 17th, 18th century, it was a kalpin. That external sign changes, because at that time, to be Gaudiya Vaishnava, the external sign was to look like Babaji. And then later on, Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta criticized this adopting of external signs without developing an internal attachment. For those who adopted the external signs without developing an internal attachment for the Lord. So in the same way, Vishwamitra, he he adopted the external signs of a Brahmana, but he was not complete in his evolution or developed spiritual evolution as a Brahmana yet. And therefore, Vashishta he rejected him. He did not, like Prabhupada writes in the purport we read, he did not accept him as a Brahmana yet, you know. So, and what happens is that later on, Vishwamitra undergoes severe obstacles in his own spiritual life, like he becomes seduced by Menaka, which I'll talk about very soon. And then and then this whole Three Sankru episode also takes place. So similarly, I just want to kind of relate it to our own spiritual life. Very often we adopt the external signs of Vaishnava, which is good. It's a important part of a development because it helps us create some sort of identity. That I want to become a devotee, and identify very strongly with the institution, and so forth. But then at the same time, if we don't work internally, if we don't introspect internally about whether we are really becoming attached to Krishna and we're really becoming detached from the material world, and we don't do something about that, then sooner or later, Krishna will arrange some kind of situation in our lives where which can be sometimes humiliating, sometimes it can be very uh, unnerving, where we realize, hey, I thought I was a devotee. I put out all these external signs of a devotee, and externally I may be practicing some of the motions of a devotee, but really I have a lot of work to do. And I thought I was a devotee, but actually I'm not a devotee. I'm just trying to practice to be a devotee. I'm attempting, I'm a sadhaka, not actually a devotee in the way that Prabhupada uses the word devotee in most of the time in his books. So then we develop a sense of, okay, what is really being a devotee, and we go internal. So in a similar way, um, Vishwamitra also had that experience. So while he was practicing yogic powers, he's becoming very yogic mystic yoga. He was becoming very, very powerful. And as usual, Indra, when he sees someone practicing some yoga or tapasya or austerities to become powerful, Indra becomes very insecure about his own position. He thinks, oh, this person is going to become so powerful, soon he's going to take over my position. That's kind of Indra's, it's like very standard behavior. When you don't have something, like Vishwamitra, you try so hard to get it. But when you have something, you are always kind of insecure. Someone is going to take it from me. Someone else is going to, usurp my position. I'm going to lose it. So you have that anxiety. So anyway, Indra, feeling this anxiety, he sends the Apsaras, the heavenly damsels, to try to seduce Vishwamitra. And first he sends Menaka, a very beautiful heavenly damsel, heavenly maiden. And Vishwamitra, while he's meditating, he just heard Prabhupada writes that he heard the tinkling bangles of Menaka just by her movement, her bangles tinkling. And that broke his meditation. Just like Sabari Muni, he heard the fishes. So he saw the fishes kissing, right? So that broke his meditation. So just by hearing that sound, which is so powerful, he became attracted to Menaka. And then it said that actually they really fell in love later on. And Menaka was also, although she came to seduce him later on, she actually really fell in love with him. And they lived for 10 years, and then they had a daughter called Shakuntala that is born of their union. And and this episode is very much, Prabhupada always refers to this episode as an example of how even a powerful yogi, a perfect mystic, a mystic yogi can fall down, whereas a devotee who's actually perfected cannot fall down, being attracted, by sex desire. Prabhupada writes that only a devotee of the Lord who is attracted by Krishna can escape the lures of women. Similarly, for men, for women as men. Once one is attracted by Krishna, the illusory energy of the world cannot attract him. So this is a statement by Prabhupada in one of the Prabhupads, different Prabhupada. So he always points this example of how Bhakti Yoga is superior to mystic yoga. But the point I want to make is that Vishwamitra, he experiences humiliating fall down. First he's defeated by Vasishta, then he practices yoga. And while he's practicing yoga, he falls down with Menaka. But this helped him, I think, to sort of introspect and realize that he has a long way to actually go. And then what he does is that he goes to a higher part of the Himalayas, then he practices austerities and yoga for much longer time, focusing on the super soul. And because in mystic yoga, you meditate on the super soul. And this time he actually learned from his mistakes and was able to be more self-controlled, because it is mentioned that Indra continued to try to make him fall down. He sent Ramba this time, another heavenly maiden from the heavenly planets. But he was not seduced by her. In fact, he actually cursed her to become a stone for 1,000 years or something like that. So that is Vishwamitra's sort of growth. And I want to just pause here for a while. I want to ask if there are any comments or questions so far about Vishwamitra's journey that you want to raise.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you. I'd only ever heard the Vishwamitra's journey up until his meeting about the cow. I didn't know the after part about Intended. So thank you so much for teasing that out, because I'd only heard up until that point, up to this time. So it makes him even more fascinating. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So I think that's interesting, that his own journey and his sort of I think that what Gyancham Prabhu mentioned like 2 days ago in his class, just like our spiritual life is sometimes like an ocean, is a journey with ups and downs, and even the downs may seem like they are very demoralizing, or can make us depressed. But even those downs are also very a part of our growth. It's a part of our spiritual life. So similarly, sometimes when we take up devotional service, very quickly we may adopt the external signs of a Vaishnava, but sometimes you may face all kinds of obstacles. Sometimes it's allurement, by wealth or by lust. Sometimes it could be our relationships with devotees, um, because you're interacting. You may have some negative interactions, and that might also demoralize us. Sometimes it is, like for some of us, it could be the disappearance of a of a spiritual master, and sometimes it could be, even in some cases, even the guru falling down. So in one way, one experiences all kinds, the difficulty of following the regulative principles, especially illicit sex. So in this way, one experiences so many different kinds of obstacles in one's spiritual life. There's so many other things that are out there. But the thing is, Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, even for a devotee, some of these obstacles actually, um, they are, even these fall downs can be pillars of success as one becomes even more determined. If one learns, one acknowledges some of the anarthas one has. One doesn't hate one. You don't hate yourself, and they acknowledge, hey, look, I have this thing, I have this problem, I need to work on it. And by that you get to know a little bit more about your anarthas, your mind, what needs to be worked on, and then you continue the process of devotional service. And those same so-called obstacles that were there, will actually become the pillars or the stepstones or stepping stones for success in our spiritual life. So going back to Vishwamitra's story, the story of Trisanku. So Vishwamitra actually continued to practice his yoga, and he continued to increase his power. And there was this person called Trishanku. Uh, he had another name before, but he's given this name Trishanku later on. He actually wanted to enter heaven in his current body. Just like now, I think a lot of people like Elon Musk now are trying to go to outer space and conquer the space. Outer space is actually kind of, so that is actually considered, in the Vedic perspective, it actually is considered to be a demoniac sort of ambition, um, because the way to enter the heavenly planets is not by mechanical means or by own material powers, but it's actually by accumulating enough pious credit to enter the heavenly planets. And then you qualify yourself to be there. So Sri was trying to enter there. Was my microphone not working? Okay, I'll just take off the earphones. Sri Shanku was trying to enter there by his um, by his own material powers, with his own body. So he approached the Vashishta Rishi and said that, hey, let me enter the heavenly planets in my current body. And then Vashishta said, no, I can't do that, because that's not the way it works. You have to accumulate that's the universal order, is that you have to accumulate the proper pious credits to enter the heavenly planets. And he rejected him. So then Trishanku knew that Vashishta has a long time rivalry with Vishwamitra. So he took advantage of this rivalry. He approached Vishwamitra Muni and said, hey, look, I went to Vashishta and asked him for permission to enter the heavenly planets, but he refused me. Can you help me? And Vishwamitra, because of his envy towards Vashishta, he decided that he's going to help him. So this is an example of how someone is helping you, is rendering some help. Sometimes we may want to render some help or assistance to someone, but actually there are other motivations, because Vishwamitra wanted to use this opportunity to show that he is much more powerful than Vashishta. So he actually, by using his yogic powers, he actually pushes Trishanku all the way to the heavenly planets. But then the demigods, seeing that, they become completely perturbed. They become very disturbed. So they complain to the other demigods like Brahma and all, and then they actually stop Trishanku from entering the heavenly planets in mid-air. So therefore, Prabhupada writes that he's actually suspended in mid-air with his head downwards. And Vishwamitra, being incensed by this, he actually, he's so powerful that he creates another material universe, for Trishanku, and wants to make him uh, resident of the heavenly planets in that universe. So Vishwamitra adopts actually the position of Brahma. He's so powerful he can do that. However, he's not. However, because Lord Vishnu is actually the maintainer of the universe, he cannot, and he doesn't have the powers of Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu is also not his servant. He was unable to maintain that material universe that he created ultimately. And then he realizes that, wait, what am I doing? Just because I want to, due to my envy of Vashishta and my desire to control, I've wasted all my yogic powers by doing this silly thing. So similarly, he kind of like similar to Saubari Muni, who after he fell down with the princess, he realizes, hey, I've wasted my time or my all my yogic powers by enjoying or trying to misuse the powers I got through my yoga. Vishwamitra also becomes remorseful, and then he stops this other universe he created, and then he goes to actually practice again. He practices spiritual life, this time for many more thousands of years. And then finally he reaches his yogic powers, reaches a peak. He becomes a Brahma Rishi. So he transfers from a Kshatriya, he becomes a yogi, he becomes a Rishi, a Maharishi, and finally a Brahma Rishi. A Brahma Rishi is actually the highest kind of highest stage of Rishi you can actually become. And Brahma awards him the title of Brahma Rishi. And Brahma also gives him the name Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra means a friend. Vishwa is universe and Mitra means friend. So a friend of everyone in the universe because of his compassion. Vishwamitra this time becomes very much purified. He becomes very compassionate. And then finally he goes to meet Vashishta. And when Vashishta meets him, at first, you know, um, generally when two sages meet each other, if one person is superior, the superior person blesses the person who's inferior. So when Vishwamitra met Vashishta actually blessed him. He didn't treat him like an equal. But Vishwamitra was not. By that he wasn't angry with Vashishta at this time. He had already become purified of anger, and he just kind of, he just took it. But then, and when he responded in that way, Vashishta saw, oh, this person has become actually, purified of his pride and all of and desire. So then he acknowledged him as Brahma Rishi, and then both of them actually embraced and became great friends, and the enmity ended. Um, and Vishwamitra actually continues his spiritual evolution. Later on, he becomes one of the gurus of Lord Ram in the Ramayana. He becomes he brings Lord Ramachandra and Lakshman from the palace of Dasarath, and then he trains them in celestial weapons, in spiritual knowledge, and he also arranges the marriage. Sort of he plays a huge role in the marriage of Lord Ramachandra and Sita. So from someone who's angry, envious, cursing, falling down, contradicting the universal laws, he becomes someone who actually is playing the role of arranging the Lord's marriage between Ram and Sita. And in Krishna's pastimes, he becomes the Brahmana who actually negotiated the marriage of Krishna with Rukmini Devi. So he plays a role again. And then again, in the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he becomes Vanamali Ghataka, who's one of the residents of Navadvip, and arranged the marriage of Lord Chaitanya to Lakshmi Devi. So this is a very interesting evolution of Vishwamitra, who goes through so many obstacles in his spiritual life, eventually becomes a devotee. So what we can get from this is that even the obstacles in our spiritual life, sometimes they may be humiliating, they may be embarrassing, but they are actually a part of our growth. And then, just like Vishwamitra in the beginning, he was adopting the external science of Brahmana. Later on, by introspection, by determination, he eventually became a real Brahmana. So in the same way, through our in our journey of spiritual life, as we after some time, when we have identified with the association of devotees, taking on the external signs of devotee, when we start and when we realize we're not yet purified, and we take more seriously, take much more shelter of Krishna, then eventually we become a pure devotee. And in fact, one other thing I want to mention is that Vishwamitra is practicing mystic yoga and he still achieved this. So what to speak of chanting the holy names? The chanting of the holy names is far more superior than practicing mystic yoga. Mystic yoga, there's some element of devotion because you're focused meditating on the Paramatma. But with chanting of the holy names, the other day I just read this quote by Prabhupada where he's saying that the chanting of the holy name is so powerful that even though we're chanting in an offensive stage, if we keep chanting, those offenses will become eradicated and will achieve success. So under all circumstances, Krishna is so merciful that he's with us throughout our entire spiritual journey. Even our most embarrassing fallen times, is with us. It is in our hearts, and is there in the form of the holy names. And as we progress and our offenses clear, we will achieve success. We just have to keep chanting, and we should try to chant not just our prescribed rounds, but even when we're walking, when we are, thinking, we're doing other things, as we keep chanting always, and Krishna is so wonderful and so merciful that he sees us as our struggle and is, sort of just trying to reciprocate with us sometimes, even though some sort of a very embarrassing situation may be arranged by the Lord's mercy. So, any comments or questions?
Hi Krishna. Thank you so much, Rupa Chandra Prabhu. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
For a wonderful description of Vishwamitra's life and also lessons that you derived from Vishwamitra and Vasishta's life. Even some of the details were like like shocking to hear. Like someone like Vasishta pondering of committing suicide or things like that. So we can understand how even the people of practicing spiritual life, in their life there can be a lot going on, but ultimately how their practice can bring them to a better position. So thank you very much for sharing. Adipurush Bro, you wanted to share something?
Wonderful class, no problem. Very good. Nice to hear from you. We were struggling with the volume, but the content was perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
How wonderful is Krishna. When
Yeah,
you
how
get
wonderful
there,
is
you get there.
Yeah, so in fact, I was thinking also because I study and teach other religious traditions, and this theme of going through a struggle, I think is there in for example, in the Catholic tradition. There's this person called Saint John of the Cross who writes about the dark night of the soul. He says that as one becomes really really sincere in one's spiritual life, one is to first of all go through different stages. The first stage is one becomes purified of one's sins, and the second stage is one becomes purified of one's internal ego. And at that time it can be very difficult. It can be very even sad, but that is where the Lord is with you most of the time. The Lord follows you throughout your journey in a spiritual life, and it is actually mature religion, to go through these ups and downs, upheavals, in our spiritual journey, and it is very much a part of our uh, spiritual progress. If we see it that way, that even our obstacles are part of our growth. The suffering in the material world, this whole material world is designed for us to propel us towards the lotus feet of Krishna. And if you see it that way, then we can take a much more positive outlook towards our struggles in our spiritual life, as well as the suffering in the material world.
We can say it is designed. We can say Krishna has designed this, and
Yeah.
like you say, those obstacles, those setbacks, by Krishna's arrangement, they intensify our our dedication. Like the gopis, the separation from Krishna intensified their love for Krishna. Their longing and their focus. Even like the story with the Gajendra the elephant in his distressed condition of fighting to the point of being fatigued and hungry under the water by the crocodiles biting on his foot. It says that that he began to focus on the Lord with undeviated attention and great intensity. So that can be a motivation for us to be closer to Krishna, even though geographic proximity may not seem to be there.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Yeah. And look at Gajendra's final position. He became a resident of Vaikuntha. Vishwamitra became someone who participates in the eternal pastimes of Lord Ramachandra, of Krishna and of Lord Chaitanya. I think I just look at that whole journey from that perspective, the long-term journey that he had to go through. It's just amazing what he got at the end of it.
Yeah. Behind everything is Krishna's loving hand.
Yeah.
Behind everything is Krishna's desire to help us come back.
Jai. Thank you.
Oh, glory to Prabhupada.
Jai.
Thanks, Rupa.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rupa.
Great
class. Alan is there.
Good to see you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
When I just had one kind of thought that came while Adipushpa was discussing and you were responding, like how in Srimad Bhagavatam also, like one example of Gajendra, but throughout Srimad Bhagavatam we don't see accounts of some devotee actually extremely happy and like everything happened perfectly in their lives and they're like completely happy and then they just went back to Godhead. Like it's like Parikshit starts with Parikshit Maharaj, Draupadi's sons being killed, or Uttara being attacked by Brahmastra, Arjuna being chased by Brahmastra, and then it just continues continuously, pastime after pastime. Vritrasura, Gajendra, or Ambarish Maharaj, so it just seems like uh, difficulty is one way for Krishna to bring the soul closer to him, or is it like the souls respond to distress in a specific way rather than happiness? Like why it seems like distress is used as an instrument in most of the cases, if not all the cases?
So can you repeat the question? Is it the soul's response to? Was it a comment? Or?
It seems it's like an observation come a question also. Like it seems like Krishna uses distress as an instrument to bring the soul closer to him more than happiness. Is there any thoughts on that you would like?
No, I'd say that he doesn't use. Krishna wants us to be happy. He wants us to be completely blissful, but he wants us to have real happiness. So sometimes when we become illusioned by what is happiness, like I think in the previous class, I think Adipurusha Prabhu also talked about dreams. We have these different dreams that we construct, and then Krishna does what he can to shatter those dreams. And it is actually the intervention of a loving father, like that. And like you rightly pointed out, there's so many stories in the Bhagavatam. There's almost a very similar story of people, personalities, Chitraketu and so many others. They have to go through some turning point in their life, which makes them grow, which makes them religiously and spiritually mature from where they previously were into, so that they can really have a real inner transformation, and religion is not something superficial where they're externally looking pious, wealthy or prosperous in the eyes of the common man, but really inside they may be shallow. So those areas, because of Krishna's loving intervention, he makes us something. Perhaps sometimes also could be due to our own faults. Sometimes we react wrongly, but whatever it is, whether it's our our mistakes that we make, or whether it's Krishna's arrangement, the point is that ultimately they're supposed to purify us, cleanse us, and become and develop our intents. I like the word Adipurusha Prabhu use, intensify our devotion, to Krishna. Like the gopis, depending on the level of devotees, Krishna has different devices accordingly to bring us closer to his lotus feet.
In the Christian tradition, they talk about the peace of Christ. Not the peace when you're sitting there cozy by the fire drinking tea with your wife, whatever, but the peace that surpasses all understanding, that's beyond being affected by any external circumstance, peaceful even within a storm, that you're untouched. Abhayachara Prabhupada's name is the Abhay, fearless at the foot of the Lord. So situated in pure devotional service, unceasing, unmotivated devotional service, no matter if Krishna kicks you or embraces you, whatever, is a platform of complete safety. You're untouched, not cut by the sword, burned by the fire, withered by the wind, moistened by the rain. No, I'm going to continue in my devotional service, my prescribed duty. So therefore, the relationship with the spiritual master is very important, because the spiritual master gives you a prescribed duty, probably got the dish, a place. If you have, okay, he gives, okay, we bless you, we give you permission, do this, do that, very good, very good, very good. But one point, that Kurukshetra moment, when you say to the spiritual master, okay, no more friendly talks. Now I'm a disciple, a soul surrendered unto you. You tell me what you want me to do. And with that instruction of the spiritual master, not just the blessing or the permission, with that instruction of the spiritual master taken deep in the heart, you're ready to walk through a brick wall. Now look at the difficulty Srila Prabhupada went through. Why? Because he knew, my guru told me to go to the West. My guru told, and he said, I'm never separated from my spiritual master. So that instruction of the spiritual master, taken into the heart, qualifies us to not be deviated, discouraged in any ways. Our devotional service is very clear. This is my duty. This is where he asked me to go. This is what he asked me to do. I don't care if it's easy, difficult. I don't care if it kills me. I don't care if I go to hell. Whatever you want, Prabhupada, I'll do that. And with that, we are invulnerable.
Thank you.
That is why. Oh, glory to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Rupa Chandra, and Ashish Prabhu also for adding to the. Thank you. If anybody else has any questions or comments, please feel free to share now.
We've got to go. Wait a minute. Let me concentrate.
Thank you, Rupa Chandra Prabhu, for taking out your time. Extremely grateful to you for your association. His guest Rupa Chandra Prabhu ki jai.
Jai Raja Murga ki jai.
Yeah.
Shanti Vaishnava ki jai.
Thank you, everyone.